Hello, good morning. Welcome to everyone. My name is Tim Phillips from the British Council in Manchester, and it's my pleasure to introduce Amol Padwad, who's giving this presentation. I expect that Amol doesn't really need an introduction. He's very well known to most of you. Amol teaches at the J.M. Patel College in Bhandara, and he's the convener of AINET and an ELT consultant with a special interest in teacher development. And his topic today is Rethinking Teacher Motivation for Professional Development. So I'm sure it's going to be a very stimulating presentation, so I'll pass over to Amol.
Good afternoon to you all, and thank you, Tim, very much for your brief introduction. Since we are running slightly behind time, I will straightway get into a little bit of sharing or a kind of loud thinking that I propose to do here today about teacher motivation. And if you have noticed in the title, I am specifically talking about teacher motivation for professional development. And in this talk today, I would like to raise a specific issue about teacher motivation, and I would try to argue that the conventional thinking need to change. We need to have some new way of thinking about teacher motivation. And I also have some hypotheses to make about this change. And as usual, I'm happy to raise questions and leave the hall with more questions than answers. The whole thinking about this concern that I had began with a question that bothered me or that has been troubling me for the last 7-8 years. I frequently meet two types of teachers. CHB stands for clock hour basis teachers. Teachers who are hired by education institutions purely on clock hour basis. They are paid by the number of hours they teach, and they have otherwise neither any role in the institutional administration or management, nor do they have any assurance of a long-term job. These are usually young people at the beginning of their career, and they come as just visiting or guest teachers. The other group is at the other end of the spectrum. Senior, experienced teachers who are working full-time in their institutions with permanent jobs, completely assured promotions, incentives, and salaries, and in many cases even a pension, nice, decent pension after retirement. So one group of young teachers without no permanent job, no guarantee of job, and on the other end, experienced old teachers with complete security of the job. And for both groups of teachers, I had the same question: why these teachers were not interested in their professional development? My question was more concrete: why they were not interested in going to conferences, attending teacher training workshops, reading about their own profession, subscribing to research journals, etc. The first group answered that they were more concerned with their survival. They did not have any job. Their top priority was getting a decent, secure job. And that's why they were least bothered about going to conferences and seminars. The other group seemed to say that since their job is secure and nothing is going to damage their reputation or their promotions or their incentives, there was hardly any motivation for going to conferences, seminars, etc. So two different kinds of groups, but having same answer for two different reasons. So what they were talking about they were talking about their lack of motivation for two different reasons. And that's why the question keeps troubling me. We have two contrasting situations, two contrasting arguments for the absence of motivation. If people don't have secure jobs, they are not motivated for their own continuing development. And if they have secure permanent jobs, again they are equally unmotivated for their own personal professional development. So with this intriguing question, I started looking into how theories and research and other publications looked into motivation, and I came across some very common general motivation theories like expectancy value theory or self-efficacy theory or goal-setting theory or self-determination theories. These theories are not specifically about teaching, but they are theories about employment, job, profession in general. Why people go to a particular profession. Some people argue that they have certain expectations about their own value, and they go to that profession where they expect that these expectations will be fulfilled. And such other things. Some people have a belief that certain profession offers better chances to materialize their self-efficacy. So these are the general theories. There are also some specific theories about why people are motivated to join teaching. The earlier theories were about professions in general, but specifically in case of teaching, some people come to teaching because they feel that there is something intrinsically rewarding. For example, the whole process of shaping somebody's life as a teacher is immensely satisfying to you. Or some people have a passionate interest in that particular subject. People love physics and English and mathematics and want to be teachers there. That is one way of looking at this. Another way is, this is a profession where some of our psychological needs are satisfied better. And that's why some people come to teaching. We feel that we are autonomous. We feel that we are doing something which is relevant to life. We feel that we are not only increasing our own competence, but we are also making other people competent. So all these satisfactions, all these psychological needs draw people to teaching. But there are also other factors, more contextual factors. For example, as Rod pointed out in his plenary, in some societies, the status of teaching is very high, and that's why people are attracted to the profession. Sometimes there are very good growth and progress and career opportunities, and that's why people are attracted to this profession. And quite often, we are attracted by the kind of salary and other benefits we derive from that profession. But in this entire thinking, I personally believe there are certain limitations. We think of motivation as unchanging, unevolving, static phenomenon. We believe as if the same kind of thinking about motivation applies to someone who is coming to the profession and someone who is already into the profession for many years. In other words, we are thinking of motivation in the same ways for the CHB group as well as the veterans of the profession. And therefore, we often don't recognize that at different stages of the career, there are different aspects and different triggers of motivation. For example, why people join the teaching profession may be for different reasons than why they continue to stay in the profession. And again, those two sets of reasons may not explain why they would be interested not only in staying but in growing while in the profession. So the simple question with complex answer This is where I wish to argue that we need some change of thinking. First of all, I would like to argue that we have to think separately of these three stages. Why are people motivated to join teaching? And probably the answers to these questions may not be sufficient to answer the second question, why people continue to stay in the profession for years. As the famous educationist from Yale University, Jane Tompkins, said, teaching is an extremely challenging profession where your ego is battered every day publicly in front of the classroom. So we need a huge amount of stamina, perseverance, and energy to stay in that profession. So why people continue to be teachers for 30 years, 40 years? And finally, the answers to these first two questions may not be enough to explain why people may be interested not only in staying there, but in continuing to grow, because it means additional demands on your stamina and energy, and perhaps much stronger interest. I believe that there are different concerns in each of these cases and different triggers, which also means that we must have different policies and provision for them. So why do people stay in profession? I'm just referring to what currently literature says. People continue to be in the teaching profession if there are planned opportunities for growth. For example, the service conditions describe in advance that after every 5 years you would have an opportunity to go to next higher level. Your salary will increase by this amount every year. Such anticipated, planned paths of development make you stay in the profession. For some people, some very personal events may be a very, very satisfying year, or a very wonderful badge, or some award or recognition. Such events help those people stay in the profession. Another factor that helps us to continue to be a teacher for years is a sense of autonomy. I must point it out here that this is in principle a factor, while at least in the Indian context, in reality, autonomy is something which is conspicuous by absence. We hardly have much autonomy. And lots of people feel bored in the profession because there is no intellectual challenge. For example, we get a syllabus, a curriculum to teach, which goes on unchanged maybe for 10 years. So we have same sets of textbooks and course materials and assessment patterns and curriculum for years after years. And then we are bound by the prescriptions of the system with a little scope for experimentation. So we lose the intellectual challenge in the profession. It is believed that as we continue to be teachers, we become more and more competent. Or at least we start feeling that our competence is increasing, and that also helps us stay in the profession. But all teachers staying in the profession do not continue to grow. Would you agree with that? If there are, as somebody mentioned in the morning session, if there are 800,000 teachers of English in one state, can we expect all the 800,000 teachers to be conscious, professional, growers, developers? So not everyone is interested in development. Only some people feel motivated. What may be the reason? This is a very interesting idea suggested by Renor, where he says that it's not enough to provide a systematic, planned growth opportunity for teachers, the path of progress in the career. For example, promotions every 5 years, salary increase every year, increase in the designation maybe every 10 years. It's not enough to give this planned systematic growth opportunity. This path has to be a contingent path. That means it has to be a conditional path. Teachers must fulfill certain conditions related to their development in order to get those opportunities. And I believe this is what UGC has started doing for higher education. Senior college teachers must achieve a certain score of academic performance in order to qualify for their promotions. Or this is what the Medical Council of India has started doing for the last 7 years. So your progress is now conditional. It's not automatically guaranteed, and those conditions relate to how your performance improves. This is one trigger which might motivate some teachers to develop, to grow. Deci and Ryan believe that some people are intrinsically motivated. They have that kind of self-determination where they always want to do better than what they did previously. But there is another way of looking at this whole scenario of motivation, because I personally wasn't satisfied with these kinds of answers. If we look at the previous, these kinds of formulations suggest that whether teachers will grow or not will depend on the individuals. It's not a systemic mechanism. We don't yet have an idea how the motivation to develop can be built into the system. These, both the career contingent path and intrinsic motivation, ultimately tells us that we are leaving professional development to the individual. That's why I found something interesting in Daniel Pink's bestseller book Drive, where he talks about motivation from a different perspective. He gives us a brief history of how motivation, the conceptualization of motivation changed in course of time. For a long period of human history, the basic triggers for motivation were the triggers related to our survival, hunger and security, for example. That's what motivated us. He called that stage as motivation 1.0. Later on, nearer the time of Industrial Revolution onwards, he feels that these triggers were not enough. He is talking from the perspective of employees and better management of employees and motivating employees for better performance. So motivation 2.0 brought in the concept of punishment and rewards, the carrot and stick metaphor. If we want to motivate people to perform better, if we want to motivate people for growth, for development, then we have to offer a combination of punishment and rewards. If you do your job well, you will get rewards. And if you don't, you will be punished. But comes motivation 3.0, the current stage, where he argues that these concepts do not hold anymore. In the current globalized world, the punishment and rewards mechanism is not very effective, because the whole concept of our society has changed, the nature and the character of our society has changed. We have moved from the industry society to knowledge society. But interestingly, we are also looking at ourselves differently. In the earlier cases, we were looking at jobs as mechanical operations. Today, we look at any kind of job as more creative, because that's very interesting, because any job will be either an algorithmic job, as Daniel Pink calls it, which means a job for which there are very, very predictable stages. And if you write the program and instructions, any machine can do it. And there is the other kind of jobs which are amorphous, which are fuzzy, which need a lot of creative thinking and imagination. As automation has increased, every kind of algorithmic work is going to mechanization. That means machines are taking over more and more all sorts of algorithmic jobs, while humankind is left for the other kind of creative job. And for this kind of creative jobs, which we are all expected to do in the 21st century, the mechanism of punishment and rewards doesn't explain why we'll be motivated for doing well. Pink begins with a very interesting example, a puzzle for economists of the world. He gives two scenarios. In one case, Microsoft has put in a few billions of dollars, brought together world's most expert managers of the world brought together. It has put together a team of experts from various fields, and they have launched a massive project of a world encyclopedia. At the same time, a small group of volunteers have just started coming together and started putting their entries in. They are also working on some sort of public encyclopedia where everyone would be contributing voluntarily. Nobody is an expert. Nobody will get money out of it. There are no managers. And more importantly, people often contributed their personal money and time. And the question was, if these are the two projects beginning at this time, after 10 years, which one is likely to be more successful? And he goes on to say that 10 years ago, any economist would have said that the first project by Microsoft was guaranteed to succeed and the second to fail. 10 years later, we now know that Microsoft has long ago closed down its Encarta project. It has just abandoned the project, while Wikipedia, the other project, is growing enormously. Why do people put in their money, time, energy, when there are no assured returns in terms of popularity, fame, money, etc.? And this is where Pink comes with his idea of motivation 3.0. He argues that in the modern world, motivation will depend on these three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Very high salary, excellent perks, a chauffeur-driven car, and a posh bungalow in Manhattan will no more attract a decent manager to come and work for your company unless there is challenge, creativity, freedom, autonomy, and also a serious sense of purpose. In India, it's now quite common to hear very well qualified pass-outs from IIMs and IITs refusing very lucrative offers from multinational companies and instead joining some voluntary projects or social responsibility initiatives or setting up their own. So what makes them refuse a multi-million-dollar offer and go for something where the money may not be as big? Pink says these are the three things which explain why people are less after money and more after autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So if we are going to use this formulation, I'm slightly not very happy, or I personally don't completely agree with this horizontal, chronological issue or chronological formulation of the motivation theory. So, well, this is an example of motivation 2.0, punishment and rewards, where the boss is telling the secretary, I want you to cut everyone's salary by 15%, but make it look like a reward. So confusion, you are punishing people in the level of reward. And motivation 3.0, in the second case, that man in the boat, you can see clearly that the man is full of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Anyway, so what I tried to do, I'm suggesting, this is a hypothesis that I want to present before you, is changing this horizontal into vertical. So instead of thinking of 3 historical phases in the mankind's history, why not think of these 3 historical phases in an individual's personal life? In other words, can we say that motivation 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0 are 3 different stages in a teacher's career? Something like this, in a vertical way. And probably this might explain why the young novice clock hour basis teachers and the experienced full-time permanent senior teachers had the same answer to the question why they were not interested in their development. At the beginning of the career, when we are about to enter the teaching profession, our immediate concerns are survival concerns. Not necessarily in terms of hunger, but at least getting a secure job, good salary. And along with that, entering a classroom for the first time, feeling the trauma of being bullied by our students, and then gradually learning the tricks of surviving. At the initial stage of our career, this is our top priority. And our motivation will be geared to those concerns. And if all those concerns are addressed, we'll feel motivated to go further. Somewhere in the middle of the career, we are settling down in the profession and we are looking out for growth opportunities, and incentives, rewards, maybe punishments will motivate us further. But by the time we are already in the mid or late career, when we are quite settled down financially, pedagogically, professionally, then how much salary we get, what reputation we have earned, whether we have managed to build our own personal house and whether we have got a 4-wheeler or not, these issues no more trouble us. And that's the time when we are looking for autonomy, mastery, purpose. That's the time when we start thinking about the questions, am I doing something relevant? Am I doing something creative? Am I contributing something substantial? So if these 3 different kinds of provisions are available at 3 different stages of our career, I believe we might be able to ensure that teachers keep developing. So my argument is, well, I'll quickly skip that slide, but just mention that this has a very, very strong correlation with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you look at the 3 basic stages there, you can see that the lowest 2 stages are related to security and survival. The next 2 related to the needs of incentives and recognition, and the last 2 related to autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So what are the implications? I would like to argue that we have to think of motivation as a constantly evolving thing. And what motivation means for a teacher at the beginning of the career is different from a teacher in the middle of the career or a teacher well settled into it. And there are different aspects and triggers of this motivation for different stages. So what motivates teachers to join may not continue to motivate that teacher to keep developing. And therefore, we have to think of motivation for development separately from motivation to join and motivation to stay. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I think we have, team, do we have some time?
I think, thank you very much, Amol. I think we're running close with time for the next presentation. If you have any questions, I think Amol will be here to answer them. I'd just like to say thank you very much to Amol. We have a little gift for him.
Thank you very much.
I think the topic motivation is obviously very important in terms of getting quality. So I think Amol has raised a lot of interesting things to think about. Thank you very much.